Thanks, Andrew. The council's clearly making great strides across the country, and I'm very happy to be facilitating this panel today. This is an impressive group of people and far more interesting than hearing from me, but so with that, I will let everybody do a 1-minute introduction, starting with Joe Vasquez, and we'll get started. So Joe.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Atticus. My name is Joe Vasquez, and I am an investor focused on impactful technologies. I'm also an entrepreneur and an innovation consultant for Global 2000 corporations. I'm currently a venture partner at Rebel Partners, which is based out of New York City, and I'm an independent innovation consultant based out of San Francisco, spending a lot of time on the plane. I am deaf, I am Latino, and I am a first-generation college graduate. My story is the embodiment of the American dream, but I realized that not everyone has the privileges that I did. I've made it my life's work to bring opportunity where there is none by being a high school math teacher, by co-founding the Michelson Runway Accelerator, which is the first startup accelerator focused on higher education and workforce development technologies. And also an early co-founder for StartX, which is one of the first university-based startup accelerators based out of Stanford. So thank you for having me join today's conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. And next we'll go to Charlie.
Well, hi again. Atticus, thank you for having me as well, and it's an honor to participate with everybody on the panel. I consider myself to be one of the most fortunate people in the world. I get to do what I love and work with incredible, talented people who are part of the team at Rocket Lawyer. Rocket Lawyer is a tech company in legal tech that's really working to solve this vexing problem of the fact that justice is out of reach for most people, not some, but most people in the United States, but also around the world. And it's mostly because of cost. As we know, justice is not equal, and it's very expensive. It can be extremely complicated. And so we started Rocket Lawyer with a really simple mission to make the law affordable and simple enough for everyone. We've made a lot of headway. We have a long way to go when we see atrocities like what happened to, like the murder of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor. It's a wake-up call, a horrific wake-up call, a reminder of how far we still have to go to make justice available to everyone. At Rocket Lawyer, we work with millions, literally, of small businesses around the country. So we have a unique vantage point to see the enormous amount of distress, but also hope that is going on in America right now. Let's face it, millions of businesses, and we have about 12 or 13 million business customers right now, and millions of them are in distress. Restaurant owners, construction industry, schools and preschool and daycare, all sorts of folks are in a lot of trouble. But I will say, and we'll talk about it, and I'll come back to it before I just stop my remarks right now, there are hopeful signs. We've seen 50% increase in business startups since the pandemic. And what I hope more than probably anything else for those people who are trying to make the best of this bad situation is that Joe Biden gets elected and the Biden administration can implement policies that gives them more of a fighting chance to survive and then thrive after this is all over. So I'll stop there, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Thanks, Charlie. Amy.
Sorry about that, technical difficulties. Hi, I'm Amy Stursberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Blackstone Charitable Foundation. And I have been 10 years at Blackstone, at the Charitable Foundation, when it was started in 2008. And I've had a long career in public service and federal and city government. And right before coming to the Blackstone, I ran the 9/11 Fund. And I never thought I'd be sitting on any panel, let alone the DNC panel, talking about that I've been in the private sector for 10 years. And so I think that though it raises a really important point, and why this panel is so important is that I joined Blackstone to build out their foundation, and the CEO was really committed to job creation. Remember, it was 2008, and it was an opportunity to sort of take my public sector background and bring it to the private sector, which is something I hope we're going to be able to talk about later, the importance of public-private partnerships. And I think, you know, we were focused at that time on job creation, and now, as we'll talk about a little later, how we can build an inclusive economy around job creation is really what's important and why we're all here today. And I think something we're all focused on in different ways. But it's a real pleasure to be here and to be sitting here with Charlie, Joe, Atticus, and Chad. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy. And last but not least, Chad Troutwine.
Thanks so much, Atticus, and to the DNC organizers. Atticus, as you know, I am very passionate about small business, so much so that I've founded several, and a couple are large enough that you can't really call them small anymore. We've created thousands of jobs across these different ventures in 44 states and the nation's capital. In education, we've launched a handful of affordable preschools. We've helped high school and college students achieve their dreams. And at Codesmith, we're training the next generation of software engineers and innovators. My media businesses have helped launch a world-famous podcast. I've produced 18 films, including one about an upstart from your home state of Illinois, of the election of Barack Obama. I've also launched a brewery in my hometown, co-founded that in Kansas City, Missouri, the place where I fell in love with politics. I'm the son of a mayor. And when I was younger, people used to ask, "Where's your dad, the mayor?" And I would correct them. My mom is the mayor of Smithville, Missouri. My uncle, Virgil, was a county legislator for many, many years. And my 98-year-old grandmother, Goldie Troutwine, has been a Democratic committee woman for several decades. Now, this starts dire, but it has a very happy ending. Just last month, my grandmother took a very bad fall down a flight of stairs. And if you can believe this, during her recuperation, she contracted coronavirus. As you can imagine, at her age and the time that she was in hospital, she would have been in the highest risk group, but she is now fully recovered. So I guess the last thing to know about me is I've got Terminator DNA. And if Goldie Troutwine can recover, so can America.
Thank you, Chad. And now to start briefly, how do each of you define innovation in the context of your work? And additionally, what do you think innovation means more broadly to our democracy as technology creates both opportunities and also threatens longstanding norms? I'll let whoever wants to start with this question begin.
I'm happy to jump in and if everyone doesn't mind, but I wanted to start off with a quick quote from Albert Einstein. We cannot solve a problem by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And it's pretty evident that over the past 4 years, the administration in place has incorporated a lot of values that don't necessarily think about a 21st century economy. And I'm excited about Joe Biden's policies to help cultivate more new business creation in 21st century economy. And for me, ultimately, innovation is a culture, it's a mindset, it's a community, it's resources, and ultimately, it's a privilege and a responsibility. My work is focused on bringing communities together, expanding access to risk capital, such as venture capital and debt financing, and instilling confidence in founders that they ultimately have what it takes to build a great company. And I noticed time and time again, underrepresented entrepreneurs self-doubt and create this, this mindset that they can't do it. So I've made it my work to really show them that they can. And innovation is ultimately what's going to cure coronavirus. It's going to save the environment with alternative energy technologies. And yes, built the next social media platform for selfies and funny chips. But I want to make it abundantly clear. We can teach and instill the values of entrepreneurship and innovation in all facets of life. It doesn't just have to be business. And these values include collaboration, empathy, resilience, grit, and creativity. So I think we need to be more comprehensive in thinking about the places where we could instill those values and create a more innovative culture in society, because that's what's going to help us lead in the 21st century and beyond.
So let me just jump in there really quickly, because it's so related to what you said, Joe, and it's really important. You made a really important point about the skills that you need to be part of this innovation economy going forward, and opportunity for all. So just, quickly, I'm not an investor or an entrepreneur, although we like to think at the Blackstone Foundation we're incredibly entrepreneurial, we're nimble, and we're responsive to what's going on in the world. And I would just give you an interesting story about the work that we do, which is with our Blackstone Launchpad, which is our signature program. It's an accelerator currently on 24 college campuses that we're going to expand. We defined innovation in the early days post the economic crisis as preparing students to sort of solve problems, start businesses, companies, not-for-profits, whatever they wanted to do. And when we started, that's what we thought it was. And it's realizing, again, more to the sort of last 4 years, that it's much bigger than that you really need to prepare everybody, all students, for 21st century jobs. It's not just a student that comes into the Launchpad that wants to start their own company. What are these skills that Joe referenced? Problem solving, leadership, communication. And we think that, now taking this program to the places that actually need it more, to more diverse campuses, historically Black colleges, Hispanic serving institutions, community colleges, public universities, is really, and places that actually, have students who may want to start companies, but also could utilize these skills. Higher education institutions they're important, and they're important in the education of our next generation. But what they're not always doing, and I would argue in most cases, is preparing this next generation for 21st century jobs. And so if we want to have inclusive growth, which we all know is important, and we're obviously all committed to in our country, then we got to bring opportunity everywhere. And I think that's something that, is really important right now.
I'll step in. Amy, this is a perfect segue. My co-founder, Will Sentence, and his team at Codesmith are training that next generation for the future of work. Specifically, we realize that for most students, a 4-year degree in computer science isn't the ideal path. It can be laden with student debt. It's an enormous time commitment. And not every student who can be a software engineer is comfortable in the traditional college environment. So as much as I support all kinds of students pursuing a university education, it isn't right for everyone. In fact, what we've learned is a laser-focused 12-week immersive with a diverse group of students who are similarly motivated yields the best results. These are the software engineers that will help drive the future of work. And we're not playing by the old rules. So it's really good to hear other members of the panel, Joe to Amy, talking about the same things that we're passionate about at Codesmith.
Yeah, invention is central to progress, and if there's anything I would say, in my own career that I'm probably the proudest of, and the most humbled by, it's the title of inventor. I think the only way that we're going to get ourselves out of, as Joe said, and I will elaborate on, out of the pandemic, is with is through invention, innovation, and execution. And I think innovation is really a combination of inventing and executing. Examples abound in the industry that we operate in, which again is legal tech. You can't go to your lawyer's office right now. Courts are closed. We've seen a dramatic increase in the utilization of our natively digital tools, like RocketSign for digital contracts, and in the innovation area, a few weeks ago, we sort of said enough with police misconduct, as well as destruction of property and things that we were seeing in social unrest. And we said that we were going to update our mobile apps to make it possible for folks to, in a secure and attorney-client privileged way, provide video evidence, capture video evidence, and then have professionals do something about it. And so I'll give you a little secret. We soft launched. It's in app stores now, where you can try it if you'd like. And we're going to do more of a rollout starting next week of this new invention, which we call Rocket Evidence. And so those are just a couple of really personal examples that myself and our team, all the way up until an hour ago, we were in product review meetings doing that. And we're just a small, Silicon Valley company. I think innovation is a combination of invention and execution, and you have to have both. And while this pandemic is one of the most dire circumstances that humanity has ever found itself in, humanity has been in difficult situations before. America's been in difficult situations before. I'll tell you one other quick anecdote. I'll let us keep going. I had the distinct honor of sitting down with Vice President Biden in his office in the White House while he was in office, and we had a wonderful chat. And then it was time for me to go. It was on Veterans Day. I happen to be a veteran. And the next meeting that the Vice President had, a guy named Ron Klain comes in and grabs him to go to the meeting. And it was the National Security Council, and Ron was the Ebola czar. And when I look at what the Obama administration did in terms of innovative approaches, fast approaches, sending the military to Africa. Former Navy, I served on the Mercy during Desert Storm, so Navy medicine. And to see that innovation in action in the Obama administration, and to see it not happening in the pandemic in the public sector, while loads of private sector innovation is going on, is just really a big eye-opener. And that small, tiny anecdotal experience of watching Joe Biden in action for myself in a crisis like this that didn't turn into a crisis like this has me incredibly hopeful for a Biden administration.
Thanks, Charlie. And I think given your answers, I mean, something I would be interested to hear is what are you doing to expand access to the innovation economy for more communities and diverse audiences? And I think I'll start with Amy on this question, and we can go from there.
Yes, so as I said in my earlier answer, I think what we're doing is being nimble and responsive. And I think Charlie made a really good point about, invention and execution. I would just say, before I get to the answer to the question, is I think this is where the public-private thing, which I was always a little leery of, really matters. We never do a project at the Blackstone Charitable Foundation without regionally working with partners across the board, entrepreneurs. I mean, we're about entrepreneurship. So it's entrepreneurs, it's government, it's universities, it's the not-for-profit sector. And I think, execution can't happen without that collaboration. I think we've learned that. But what we do around inclusiveness is really building on this existing program, as I explained before, to focus on more than teaching how to start a business is teaching and strengthening entrepreneurial skills. And we call them entrepreneurial skills. It's an overused word, but again, it's, just to repeat myself and everything that I think all of you have said and I would agree with, is that if your job readiness, right, workforce development readiness, this is all about these entrepreneurial skills, which Joe and others of you have mentioned what they are: resilience, leadership, all kinds of analytic skills that you can actually don't get in the classroom, right? Our Blackstone Launchpad is not credit bearing. It doesn't cost any money. Anybody is welcome to come. You can be a design student. You just want to walk in, but you're going to get these skills, and bringing this model, this evolved model, reshaping it to address this issue around skills development and to the places that need it most, where there's less of an ecosystem that's supporting these students to develop those skills, is, I think, the answer, to some of the problems that you're all discussing about how do you get this next generation to the point where they can get these jobs and be part of this innovation economy, not just a job. And what all the kinds of businesses that you're all running and you're developing and the funds that you're investing in. So that's what, we're doing.
If you don't mind me just jumping in on that, Amy, thank you for that note. And one thing that's in the back of my mind is, how can someone aspire to that which they do not know? And I fundamentally think all of us have a responsibility to give back to communities and teach these skills of collaboration, entrepreneurship, resilience, creativity, et cetera. And further, as small business owners, as investors, et cetera, we need to hold ourselves accountable to not rely solely or entirely on unpaid internships. I think unpaid internships are one of the tools that further exacerbate the socioeconomic divide. I mean, students that maybe don't have the economic resources to give up a salary for the summer are taking a job at McDonald's versus taking a more intellectually stimulating job at an exciting startup. So we need to think about ways that we could increase that pathway from higher education into those educational and motivating internship opportunities. So that's a space that I'm quite excited about. And
I couldn't agree with you more, Joe. I'm glad you brought that up. We have interns working in our business this summer. We pay them. And when you think about diversity and inclusion, a subject that we've been thinking about quite a lot at Rocket Lawyer, it hurts diversity and inclusion and leads to more. Just think about it. It's lots of kids from lots of different backgrounds just simply don't have the luxury of being able to work for free. And so I think you've really hit on a key issue where back to public-private partnership, I could really see public sector working with the private sector because, every startup has a different resource level and a different amount of runway given their burn rate. But I could see just brainstorming and maybe innovating together right now. You got me thinking, if any policymakers are listening, this is an area that there could be public-private partnership and there could be funds available. I know we might have a bigger class of interns to the extent that there were incentives available to do it, and maybe companies smaller than ours could have interns that wouldn't have them at all, and add to having a more diverse and inclusive set of folks in Silicon Valley and in tech in general, which is a big issue these days. That's a great point, Joe.
Let me just add one quick thing, is that it's not just internships. I think we all have to think creatively ourselves, because internships are really important, and we fund internships through our Blackstone Launchpads. But I also think, just again, not to go to the Launchpad, that's not the solution for everything, but we have sort of early stage metrics on students that go into a Launchpad, right? It's not a course, and they can put certain words on their resumes, right? With AI and the way kids get jobs. If you can even speak the language, right? If you can even have on your resume some, specific language that you all as entrepreneurs know better than I do, you're more likely to get a hit than if you just have a resume and you don't speak that language, right? So there's lots of creative ways that you can open up, again, not for everybody, but you can begin to chip away at some of these barriers to entry that I think exist, that are internships are super important, but also there's lots of other things we have to be able to willing to think about and create in order to create those opportunities.
So Amy, in your previous answer, you mentioned public-private partnerships, and Charlie, you spoke about them as well. I want to dig in on that one. I think we have big challenges ahead of us. We're going to have to do a lot of repair from the last 4 years of leadership, if you can call it that, in our White House. So I'm going to suggest some bolder things.
You can't call it that.
The Obama administration started taking bets on businesses. I want to go much bigger. The United States government should be the biggest research and development entity in the world. We should pour billions into private businesses. Pick the ones where the public sector is cautious, but we know if they worked, it would benefit everyone. There should be 10 Solyndras, meaning there should be 10 failed investments, because there will also be a Tesla, there will be a SpaceX. We should be doing more of that, not less. We shouldn't run scared. We should focus on the things we care about. And it shouldn't just be profit, but let's repair education. Let's repair tech infrastructure, getting technology into rural places, rural communities where it wouldn't be profitable for a for-profit business to do it alone. Let's take a look at the green economy, right? But really pour money into it. Arts and arts education have gone fallow over the last several years. We should all care about that, and our government should invest in private businesses, and they're going to make some mistakes, and that's fine. The successes will more than outweigh the mistakes. We have incredible talent in our venture and private equity community. Let them become part of Team Biden, this administration, and apply bold solutions to these big challenges.
Love that. And if I could just add one quick note to that, Chad, I completely agree. And historically, the SBIR program, which has been funding early stage startups, has been relatively successful, but there's so much room for expansion and improvement that you're saying. And I further think that we have an opportunity to set the values and kind of the parameters of what types of companies that we're investing in as well. For example, I was an early stage team member at a startup called Toto Math, Toto all in Spanish. And Toto Math built applications for students with special needs, which is obviously something that's near and dear to my heart. But what we found was when we were building these applications specifically for students with different abilities, different vision or hearing loss or different intellectual abilities, we found that it was impactful for everyone as a whole. And we scaled from 100,000 to 4 million users on the platform in less than a year. So thinking about how we could build in those values of equity and inclusion into those funding dollars as well will help us build a more equitable 21st century economy. So thanks for bringing that up.
I love that, Joe. I regret that I didn't frame it that way. That is exactly what I was thinking. And I think the adjunct to that is we have to get rid of crony capitalism. If this seems like that someone has an inside track to those dollars and they don't meet the parameters that all of the people want, it's a failure. Can you imagine what this administration would have done with money to pump into the businesses of their friends and the well-connected? I'm just glad they weren't organized enough to try it. So, Joe, thank you for framing what I hope was a good idea and giving it a better skeleton.
Yeah, and with that, I guess I'd say with the increasingly global challenges to America's place in the world, what could the U.S. leaders be doing better to create that more inclusive economy at home and abroad? Kind of going with what you're talking about on, more active investment and everything. And currently, and how can that innovation economy or the innovation economy we're talking about help lead us there?
Yeah, I want to jump right in on that. That's something that we live every day. Rocket Lawyer operates all over the world. We have offices in London and Paris and the Netherlands. And and you could see immediately over at the 2016 election, people outside the United States started to ask different sorts of questions about what was going on here than in my 30 years now, first in the U.S. Navy and later as an entrepreneur, but in 30 years of traveling abroad, representing the United States either in uniform or in the uniform of business, it became overnight one of the most pessimistic environments that I've seen, again, in my career, based on watching the Trump administration begin to undermine the norms of diplomacy, the post-war structures that had served us quite well, in my humble opinion, going from having extremely capable and competent emissaries of the United States in the form of ambassadors and people on the ground in the various countries to having many diplomatic outposts vacant of senior leadership, which is currently the case. And so we've got, as a business person who does business outside the United States every day, even during the pandemic. Rocket Lure Europe is a joint venture with a French company, for example. So I've got experience in what I speak, and our reputation and our opportunities abroad have certainly suffered in the last few years as a result. So what do we do about it? Back to where we started, we continue to innovate. There is a need and an increasing demand for American innovation. And so we just keep working and we keep innovating. And then we start to, I think in a Biden administration, repair the reputational damage that's been done as far as will we keep our word when we go abroad.
Really quick, sorry to interrupt, but because we're close on time, want to make sure we get a brief moment to answer this one. We'll do one more question really quick.
Well, I love what Charlie was saying. This is another area where I would go bold. The recent mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, Sly James, and his head of education, Julie Holland, nearly got universal pre-K passed for all of Kansas City. I think that's something we should consider on a national level, but the research is pretty clear. If we could educate folks for 13 years, which we have K through 12 now, but we're only 13 years, we should probably move down to about age 2 or 3, as long as it's developmentally appropriate. I'm not suggesting we chop off the last 2 years of high school, but these are the kinds of things where we should kind of act big. And if we want to try and make the kinds of difference we can in people's lives, it should be something like that.
Can I just jump in really quickly? Throwing one more quick thing. Ultimately, there is no innovation without talent. And immigrants have founded 51% of American companies worth at least $1 billion or more. And over the past 4 years, we've seen policy after policy that says that people from other countries cannot come to America to build businesses or work for businesses. We fundamentally had a brain drain. H-1B visas are being cut, and all of these policies are doing everything antithetical to true American values. So we really need to think about ways to attract and build that reputation, but attract more talent to the United States to build great companies of the future, because immigrants are a large part of the foundation of our society. So I wanted to make sure I threw that out there as well.
Absolutely. And I guess
co-signing that one.
I would jump all over the immigration talent point, but Atticus, keep rolling, man.
Absolutely. And just one thing would be, what type of efforts do you think it would be best to focus on in those kinds of collaborations, which you had touched on before? Do you think, not necessarily with what, but how? Would it be more specifically to Chad's earlier point of more R&D, or would there be more innovation, innovation centers or other types of programming out there that would be more helpful? What would be the highest impact or the highest and best use solution? And I'll start, if we could go Charlie, Amy, Chad, and then finish up with Joe.
Yeah, look, I just want to finish maybe the point that I was making earlier. We need competence first and foremost. For those of us who have navigated different administrations over our careers, this is the most incompetent group of folks I have ever seen, and I'm going to be really clear about it. I've worked and navigated through other Republican administrations with really capable people in roles, not just at the top, but throughout government. And that is not the case right now. And so we need to the first thing is just get it back to a level where jobs are even filled, and then filled with folks who are capable of administrating this complicated and so important executive branch. And I'll stop right there. Let's do that first, and then go beyond it.
So let me just derail this conversation just for one quick minute, because I think everything that Joe and Charlie and Chad said, leadership, immigration policy, R&D, really important. I would just say one thing I think that is in a little bit of a different vein is just, I think that there, in my last sort of 10 years in the entrepreneurial space from a different perspective, is really understanding the importance of an ecosystem, which includes all of those things that you're talking about. And I think what a lot of programming, a lot of policies are dealing with one issue, but I think that this perspective that some political, some governors, certainly some governors, and most importantly, I think, who are really focused on this is, if you think about an entire entrepreneurial ecosystem at the same time, the sustainability of innovation and growth, and then obviously worrying about inclusiveness and other things where specific policies and programs have to be put in place. But I think that that's something that we forget about. I think everybody's got their kind of bandwagon that they're on, but that the strength of an entire ecosystem is what's really going to sustain innovation, even in a bad time, right? It's hard to break down an entire ecosystem than it is one piece of it. And so I just wanted to add that.
That's so wise. That is so wise. Any of these individual programs that we've talked about are destined to lack the support they need without a rebuilding of a cohesive ecosystem. Look, our country is endowed with so much natural resources, our best resource, our human talent. I hope we all get back to that place where we are a magnet for the next generation of talent. We've become filled with self-doubt. It's hard not to. Pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, treating long-standing allies as strangers or enemies. We have a lot we have to repair, but I haven't lost faith. I think that we start to put these things together again, that we will assume that role, holding hands with the rest of the global community, but in a forward role, a leading role. And I'm even more encouraged after being on this panel.
Love that. And Amy, I've really loved your emphasis on the importance and the value of ecosystems. And I wrote a report pretty recently about the 5M framework that could be used to build ecosystems. And one of the most important values is to be culturally responsive, locally responsive, and listen to what's actually going on the ground. And there really is no playbook or one size fits all to building an ecosystem. So we need to find ways to empower local leaders and local innovation economies and ecosystem builders and support them in what they do best. So I really, really appreciate your points on that point.
Well, thank you all very much for being a part of this panel. It's been very enlightening, and I think it's very clear that, I mean, each of you has something very distinct and great experience that could can help us in both our policy and our political agendas moving forward on this. So with that, I think we can turn it over to my good friend, John McCarthy.